Premier Moe, thank you very much for your time today. I know it's very busy. How confident are you that Canada can do what needs to be done over the next 3.5 weeks to avoid a Trump tariff war in early March?
Well, I'm 100% confident that I know what we need to do, and that is to engage with all of the decision makers that may be in or around President Trump, to engage with the businesses that also have the opportunity to engage with those folks. And so we need to tell the story, the North American story of how we have created for years now, decades, the strong North American economy. And so, we'll see where this finds us, and I have no illusions that we aren't going to have some challenges ahead. But I am 100% confident in knowing what I and other premiers and leaders throughout Canada and throughout North America, what we have to do and what our work looks like over the course of the next number of days and weeks.
You know that the White House has sort of delineated a series of two separate tariff threats here. There's the threat about border security and fentanyl and illegal immigration, and then there's this discussion about broader economic tariffs, perhaps in April. Can I get your take on, how that all plays out here, and if you think that we are able to sort of avoid both of those? What's the best case scenario here? How do we get to that point?
Well, that is the best case scenario, is that we avoid both of those and we go back to growing, our North American energy security, our food security, and our manufacturing security. The first, the fentanyl border security threat, that's something I think we agree on as Canadians with the president, is if we can remove fentanyl from our communities, our province, our nation, and our continent alongside the Americans, that's good for all of us. The second is the broader renegotiation, I would call it, of our USMCA, or our Free Trade Act, across North America, and that is going to take some work. And listen, we're going to hear words from all sides. We've heard some from Toronto today, and we're going to continue to hear opinions from south of the border. And I would just encourage all Canadians to keep their eye on where we want to get here and talk about where we want to get here, which is back to that growing economy where we're creating jobs and creating opportunity on both sides of the 49th parallel, and thereby creating that stronger North American economy. That's the goal, and we need to keep our eye on the goal.
I know that your position on retaliatory Canadian tariffs is basically the less the better. You've supported the idea reluctantly, but I also know the situation is so fluid and positions evolve. Can I get your stance currently on the idea of some kind of a tit-for-tat energy war between Canada and the U.S., Canada putting tariffs on our energy exports to the U.S.? Is that something we need to consider now as part of any arsenal?
Well, we always need to be prepared. However, we need to put the decisions in the order that they need to be made. And I would say, currently, there are no tariffs or counter tariffs. And that's a good thing for all of us, not just Canadians, for all of us in North America. And so we always need to be prepared, and we work alongside other provinces and our federal government. And yes, even working alongside the American administration to the degree that we can influence their decisions. However, right now we don't have tariffs. That's a good thing, and it's our intent to keep it that way. So I don't think we need to talk about what tariffs might look like, what counter tariffs might look like. We need to talk about how we're going to not have that kind of an environment, because it isn't good for Americans, and it certainly isn't good for Canadians.
I know you're heading down to Washington, D.C. next week as part of a team of Canadian premiers. Who are you going to be meeting with to push the case for both Saskatchewan and Canada?
We have a number of meetings set up as the Council of Federation, so all of us, the 13 premiers, of which myself would be included in that delegation for a couple of days. We're down there as a province of Saskatchewan, as well as we have a number of contacts down there. And without naming names until the meetings do occur, I'd say the target audience for us is any of President Trump's cabinet, the secretaries, governors we've been meeting with, up to and including just recently, senators, congressmen, as well as other various industry leaders. We share industries across our 49th parallel. We share industries across North America, and they have a voice with the president and the Trump administration, as well as they do have a voice with decision makers in Canada. And so we're hitting a meeting with a fairly broad cross-section of folks, both as Saskatchewan delegation, but also as a member of the Council of Federation.
There has been a lot of talk, as you know, in the past week about bringing down trade barriers between provinces. You've been in office long enough to know that is an issue that our country has been wrestling with for decades. Do you think in the midst of this crisis that anything major can actually be achieved on boosting interprovincial trade, let's say in the next couple of weeks?
Sure, we need to remove all of our exemptions in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, and I've encouraged other provinces to do that, and our officials to look at it, removing any that Saskatchewan may still have in place. The largest trade barrier that we have interprovincially across this nation is the inability for us to buy energy from one another, and the inability for us to build capital infrastructure like a pipeline across this nation. And I would say that is the single most largest trade impediment that we have interprovincially in the nation of Canada. I was pleased to see a change of heart by our federal minister of energy, as well as some of the Liberal leadership candidates, and that's a positive for them to see their erroneous ways and now support that type of infrastructure, of which Saskatchewan always has. So there is the Canadian Free Trade Agreement that we need to continue to work on removing any exemptions from, and we are, as provincial leaders, and the federal government has a role, as they have the largest number of exemptions, and they're working diligently on that. But we need to build some energy infrastructure and continue to ensure that our rail and port infrastructure is working well, so that we can access not only other Canadians with the products that we produce, east to west, north to south, but also access the rest of the world. So we're not entirely reliant on the United States of America. And Saskatchewan knows a thing or two about that, as we are the least reliant on the U.S. That being said, they're still our largest trading partner and greatest ally.
Are you hoping that the calculus will change on pipelines, let's say in the province of Quebec, which, as you know, thus far has been very resistant to the idea?
And it's the federal government's ultimate decision on whether pipelines are built or not. And so what matters is the federal government would be approving projects that are proposed. We've seen them not approve projects like Energy East that would provide energy security for those in Quebec, Atlantic Canada, and Ontario. And I would say that, that type of an attitude does need to be revisited, so that we can ensure that we have energy security in our nation of Canada, and add to, I think, what the goal of the President Trump's administration is, which is really energy dominance, so that they have a significant play in the energy space, in the AI space globally. We can be a part of that energy security for our continent, but we need to change our ways a bit in the way of how we prioritize that kind of infrastructure across the nation. We see the federal leadership, Liberal leadership candidates changing their mind, and we welcome that. They've been erroneous in their decisions in years gone by, and we welcome them seeing things from the perspective of Saskatchewan finally.
Let me ask you about border security. Your province shares a border with both North Dakota, Montana, as you know well. You've talked about the Canada Border Services Agency being put under the umbrella of the Canadian military. Are you satisfied with what the Trudeau government has announced so far? What more can be done?
Well, I had made the suggestion that they should at least consider bringing the CBSA under an arm of the military. That would be an increase in our military spend, and it would also provide the CBSA with a number of officials, military officials, that would be able to augment and enhance some of their services in the short term until they're able to hire additional folks. You've seen the provinces like Saskatchewan enhance our border security plans, and we've done that in conjunction not only with the federal government, but in conjunction with our southern neighbors, Montana and North Dakota, and we've been in touch with both of the governors in those particular states, and in some way, shape, or form, they're doing something similar on the southern border. And so I think border security is in a better place today than it was even a few months ago, with federal investment, with provincial investment, with us paying attention to it. I think we need to continue our focus, though, on removing fentanyl from our communities. It's a priority for the president, but it's also a priority for Canadians. This is not a drug at all. It's poison, and we need to keep it out of our communities, our provinces, our nation, and our continent where we can. This is an opportunity for us to, have a look in the mirror and do the right thing when it comes to removing this awful substance that is killing people in our community, and all too often our friends and family.
And before we go, I have to get your reaction to what President Trump again talked about today, Premier Moe, about Canada becoming a 51st state, being potentially annexed or absorbed by the United States. How do you sort of frame that when you hear that kind of stuff?
Well, that simply isn't going to happen. And, you know, I've heard the Prime Minister in Canada also say that isn't going to happen. And I would like to hear him say that more rather than, you know, repeat it in any way that, you know, this is something that the President is very serious about. What I see the President being very serious about is, you know, addressing, you know, the conversation around USMCA, addressing the conversation around border security, fentanyl, illegal migrants, those types of things. I don't take the comments seriously with respect to the 51st state, and I don't give them credence by repeating them in a room of industry leaders from across the Canadian, across our great nation either. And so I was disappointed to hear those comments today by our Prime Minister. I think there is a much more collaborative way forward, and I would hope that our Prime Minister and our Liberal government would be looking for those points where we can collaborate and come to a, you know, get ourselves back to a space where we are entirely focused on that shared economy and that integrated economy we have, and growing it into the future on behalf of the folks that we represent in Canada and the U.S. and collectively across North America.
Scott Moe is the Premier of Saskatchewan, joining us today on Power Play. Premier Moe, always great to have you with us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Todd.